Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Uncover the Human. This week, we wanted to talk about a topic that is hot on everybody's mind, especially after 13, 15, however many months of a pandemic. It's been
47,000.
feels like about 27 years. We wanted to talk about the importance of taking breaks and why it is such a valuable thing to do, how it's not a selfish thing to do to end up taking some self-care, and why it's especially necessary after a year like this. So, Cristina, you actually mentioned something that reminded me of this just before we even started. We were talking about getting outside the house for the first time in a couple of days, which is an experience I have definitely had a few times over the course of the pandemic. But that one, there's always that weird moment in a pandemic, after all the pandemics we've had, where you walk outside. It's been a few days and the air feels entirely different. And you think to yourself, haven't been outside since Tuesday.
And I don't know what day today is.
Yeah.
Which is another indication of not knowing and how long you've been inside and needing to take at least a change of scenery, and then a break, and then a change of scenery again, is when you look outside and you realize it's Friday because your neighbors have their trash cans out. Otherwise, it could be any day of the week, any day of the month.
That's actually, I think, one of the key parts about taking a break that makes it so refreshing, especially if you can actually get away, or at least purposely take a break, not just, sit and scroll Facebook or whatever, which ends up being like very tiring after a while. If you're purposely taking a break, it breaks that monotony of just the everyday feeling like every other day. And short of there being trash cans out, I would have no idea that it's Friday.
Indeed. Yeah, I got in the car this morning to take my kids to Grandpa's house. And as I was backing out of the garage, I couldn't figure out the bright light that was shining in my eyes. And I'm like, wait, why does this feel so different? And it's cloudy. It's not even sunny today. And that's when I realized, I don't think I've done this for at least 6 or 7 days.
Sometimes I feel like a sunflower, you just get outside and then suddenly everything feels different. You kind of automatically turn towards the sun, just rotate up there. Yeah, something's different here.
And it doesn't help that it's been cold and snowy and foggy all week, because you would usually at least go out once a day for an outdoor walk, but I've been indoor walking. So my breaks, well, no breaks, but my life has gone from the office in the second floor to the kitchen in the ground floor, to the treadmill in the basement, and then every once in a while I venture to the couch for 20 minutes or so. But not really a break.
Not quite the change of scenery you're looking for. No. I think that one of the reasons the change of scenery helps, and you can, if you think about like work retreats or corporate retreats, they're almost always held off-site, and I think there's really value in that, because it's too easy to fall back into the habit of wherever you are doing that thing that you do when you're there. That's why they say don't work in bed, because you'll start to kind of conflate work instead of it just being a place for rest or just being a place for sleep. And if you're in the office, then it feels like, just an everyday day.
Then you'll fall asleep.
Well, unless you mess up your bed. See, this is why it's important.
Yes. Office desk, bed, same thing.
Got something caught in my throat.
Any memories of falling asleep in the office come to you?
That has happened more times to me than I'd like to talk about. Might have something to do with not eating breakfast a lot of the times, then eating way too much at lunch, and then getting that nice comatose feeling about 2:00.
Working 16-hour days.
That's your
code.
When you're always staring at a screen. That's the other thing that's interesting about the pandemic, is that even in the off hours, I'm generally staring at some kind of screen, because it's either working on something on a laptop or watching some TV, because there's only so much you can do outside, and especially in winter, there's only so long you can stay outside. So you end up like just screen after screen after screen, and then you take that one walk in a week, and you're like, oh my god, the world exists like more than 20 feet away. That's insane.
Yes, it does. And both you and I took a break very recently, so that made the world even bigger than normal.
Yeah, spend some time in Breckenridge. You got a whole week in Keystone. That's nice.
Well, in three and a half days. and a few hours and 10 minutes. But who's counting?
The person who didn't get enough break, I think.
Yes. I kind of got back and I was like, wait, I think I should have stayed longer.
On second thought, I'm wishing I was there.
Yeah.
And you got a good break there. You got to actually take a break from the regular responsibilities, not just work, but also doing things like having to homeschool kids and everything during the pandemic. Another fun pandemic adventure that makes every day feel a little bit like every other day.
Yes. Another good way to know what day of the week it is when your kids are remote schooling and the teacher is the one that says, "Happy Monday." I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, Monday. I got it. Thank you for that.
And then you got to let your kids have that instead of just immediately being like, is it a happy Monday?
Yes. Well, and actually our first grade teacher confused us this week because she messed up on the videos that she posted. And so on Monday, she kept saying, today is Tuesday. And I'm like, no, it's not. I know it's not. I know it's not Tuesday. Stop lying to me.
It's involuntary gaslighting.
It is. Especially because on Tuesdays, my kids go to grandpa's house. And so I'm like, I know it's not Tuesday because they're with me this afternoon. So
it's such a I don't know, that autopilot thing just really comes back every time I think about the need for breaks, because you can eventually almost gaslight yourself. You're like, surely this week is over, and somebody's like, it is Tuesday afternoon. Crap. All right.
Not over. Yeah. But breaks are crucial, and they do seem selfish, especially when you are a parent or have many other responsibilities besides yourself. And you leave, and now that you've left, you're kind of like, oh, okay, I've just left all the responsibilities behind on somebody else's shoulders. So that's very difficult. I remember when working, I'm making it sound like I'm not working now, but different, I guess, corporate working. I had to always make a choice between really being on break and not, shutting down my email, turning off the alerts, not checking anything, not getting tempted for whatever 2 weeks I would be overseas in Italy most of the times, or spend whatever 20 minutes an hour at the end of every day to catch up on whatever I've missed, which neither of them felt like a break, because whenever I did shut down or shut off and unplugged, that also meant that on my return back from vacation, I would literally walk into 4,000 emails I would have to read and not know what happened, and have to catch up in less than a day to be able to just keep going. And that was more stressful than me just taking a half hour at the end of the day and just going through conversations and be like, okay, I know what's going on. I'm ready to go back.
And that actually highlights a pretty important thing that's happened in the pandemic. And a lot of people have talked about this one, the idea that it's especially for people who are brand new to working from home or were brand new 15 months ago. It's hard to know where to draw the boundary, because you are working at home, your laptop's always there. We work in an internet world now. I mean, emails, IMs, all very reachable on both your computer and your phone, which makes it especially important and difficult to draw that boundary. So I just can't work right now. And it's something that kind of came up, some social pressure in the pandemic as well, of like, look, I may not necessarily have something to do right now, but that doesn't mean I want to just jump on, the 90th Zoom happy hour of the week or something. Like, yeah, I'm not doing anything, but I've had 4 of these this week and I'm tired.
Yeah, definitely. And that's what I experienced when I was in Keystone. It was actually my very first time of ever in 46 years of life of going on vacation by myself. I've never been on vacation by myself. And mainly because I've always been kind of afraid of being with my mind on my own and nobody to rescue me. It can definitely be a dangerous path. But actually it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. It was actually pretty good. But it was incredible to just wake up and kind of feel like doing just not having any plans and deciding what to do at the moment. It was very Eckhart Tolle.
Very power of now.
Very power of now. And it was like, what do I feel like doing now? Well, how about a walk? sounds good. And then even on the walk, I would be like, do I feel like turning right or left? Well, I'm the only one that has to decide. Very refreshing. Hence why I needed way more than 3.5 days and 2 hours and 17 minutes and 40 seconds.
As long as you're consistent with that number, nobody's going to check this.
I might have added a few hours already.
Wishful thinking. Just, I wish I'd had those extra hours. I heard some quote one time, and I'm going to butcher it now because I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's something like most of the grievances of humankind can be traced back to man's inability to sit with his thoughts for 10 minutes. And there's definitely some of that. Like, it's easier to be distracted at some level. And that's, I think, another huge reason that taking a break is important, because once you have specifically chosen for yourself to make that break, for lack of a better word, to separate into like, okay, now I'm going to choose what to do. I'm not going to let it be driven by obligation. And I am the one that I'm obligated to now. You get, you can be a little more comfortable with your thoughts, and you're not as much in the escapism of the day-to-day of like, well, I can already imagine the 4,000 emails stacking up, and I'm going to go preemptively either take care of that or have to worry about that the entire time I have a break. So it's something that ends up coming up a lot. Just the ability to sit with your own thoughts is difficult until you actually give yourself a chance to do it, because there's so much to do all the time, and there's always something you could be doing. And so it's hard to be like, yeah, I'll just take this time for myself until you do.
Well, and there's so much pressure, especially in the US, way more than in Italy, I would say. Italy, like, sit and do nothing is what life is about. So nobody's going to judge you for that.
That sounds nice.
But in the US, there's so much pressure around if you're not busy, if you're not doing, then you are wasting time, not succeeding, useless, not good enough, not whatever, insert the ... in there. That we always feel like we have to be doing. We have to. If it's not kids, it's school. If it's not school, it's work. If it's not work, is
working out.
We make up ways to stay busy, because not being busy means you're less than.
Yeah, it's a kind of a bad end result of the incentive structure that we have. And you can see kind of where it came from. You've got, let's say you're running a company, you've got employees, they're doing work for you. There's a lot of like tasks you want to see completed, projects you want to see move forward. There's a very easy and understandable incentive to say like, oh man, this person really just busted their ass for the last month, right? They did way more hours. Now we're ahead of where we thought we'd be. And you go and you want to reward that, because you're like, wow, that you really went above and beyond there. So you give that, kudos or rewards or raises, whatever it is, because you're appreciative of the work that has been done. But that then reinforces that what is valuable singularly is getting work done consistently, and that doesn't necessarily take into account that work can be done a lot better if you have that mental space and the break, and you have enough time to approach a problem, rather than just insisting that and it becomes this kind of self-reinforcing social thing where everybody has to hustle all the time. There's just always doing something, because otherwise you're going to be falling behind. And you should be rewarded for being able to just hustle longer and sleep less than everybody else.
Yes, not eat, not have a family, not care about anything else. And it's toxic. It's toxic. It's destructive, because none of us can actually survive well. I just read an article, actually, and I'm trying to remember who it was. There's a company, and it's a pretty famous company, that it's now paying employees for taking time off. Like, on top of paid time off, they actually are going to pay them something like $500 a week for taking time off, because they've realized that taking a break, not working yourself to death, not being there all the time, actually makes you a better worker. It makes you more productive. It makes you more engaged. It makes you more agile to change. It makes you more innovative. Again, like, the list goes on and on and on. And it's because you need to just mentally disconnect and physically be somewhere else, even if it's the office in your house or the basement on the treadmill.
I kind of like to think of it as like, battery power and a battery life. Like you've got, let's say you have some task at work that is going to take like 10 processing units. I don't know, it'll take like 80% of your battery to be able to like get through this. If you're constantly like running yourself to the edge and then only recharging about 10%, like either you might get lucky enough to slowly take that giant task out in chunks, or you will never actually get the full task done because you're not going to be able to rest enough to actually take it on. And that's especially true with just like a lot of complex tasks. But I think the more important feature is what you're saying is that you lose the innovation and the collaboration, because once you're tired and you're out of energy, first of all, it's harder to regulate your emotions. So there's a lot more difficult interactions anyway. But secondly, your worldview shrinks too. Like, well, I need to get this done. I barely have enough energy, so I'm only going to get this done. And if that ends up, involving, oh, also I should email these 3 people, there's a higher chance you don't email those people, or you don't talk to somebody about who your change is going to affect, because that's just going to add to the pile. And you just want to get this one thing that you personally have to get done. Yeah. And so you lose that collaboration when you start to get tired, and you start to lose that the ability to take on larger tasks and do it in a way in which the whole company or the whole organization or just your team even is going to benefit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's nothing like working on something that's your idea that you're supposed to be collaborating with, but you shortcut it and do it on your own because you don't want to add the extra time or whatever mental block is creating that I'm just going to do it myself. And then you deliver the final product at the last second. So it's the 11th hour and the feedback you get is,
it's not going to fit. Not going to work.
What about this, and that doesn't make any sense. And I've actually experienced that. Well, on the giving end, I'm really good on the giving end of this. But I remember in a previous workplace where we both work at, actually, it was in the very first years. I don't know if you were there yet, but I was in part of the team that worked on this agenda for the very first summit where everybody came together. And I remember getting, for some reason, at the last, literally 11th hour, the day before, I got Joe, my boss at the time, who you knew, sent me the agenda. And he was like, okay, can you review this? This is what we're going to do at the summit and make sure that we haven't missed anything. And I remember looking at it and thinking, oh God, this whole thing needs to be redone. I can't even edit this. Like, I can only throw it away and start from scratch. And so it took some soul searching to figure out what feedback to provide, because I knew that we had maybe 12 hours to redo the whole thing, and it had been worked on for 5 days. And so I remember, like, at 11 o'clock at night, making the decision of, well, this could be my last day of work. So let's make peace with that possible consequence. And I might as well point out the elephant in the room when I have this communication with Joe. And so I actually said that. Like, I remember picking up the phone and saying, like, okay, so you're free to fire me after I give you feedback. And do you still want to hear it? And if so, this doesn't work. You're gonna have people running away. Because I think most of it was, let's talk at people for 3.5 days. And then 2 hours before their flight leaves, ask them for their opinion. I'm like, this is the first time people have gotten together ever in this company. No. And he didn't fire me. I was there for 3 more years. So there you go. I think he promoted me. I think that was one of my very first promotions.
That's actually a pretty good analogy for how most promotions end up happening. You just have to point out something about, like, look, this is bad.
Yeah. Most of my promotions definitely always come after I point out what needs to be fixed. For some reason, I've mostly, not all the time, I've been burnt too, but I've mostly worked for managers who appreciated being challenged and the honesty and the courage.
Definitely makes for better management. I mean, because otherwise it's just running the everybody's going to do what I say, and well, you better hope that your opinion is really good, and nobody's opinion is that good.
Yeah, so I don't know that we corrected it to being a much better or perfect summit, but there was at least a lot more interaction and collaboration and teams of people making decisions and working together and brainstorming. Yeah.
That's actually an interesting piece of what it means to take a break, because taking a break isn't just unplugging for a bit. It's you have to kind of be deliberate about taking a break. There's been a lot of articles recently about the idea that, like, it's something that I think a lot of people have been doing. You kind of stop working, at the end of the day, but then you end up either just watching TV or be scrolling Twitter or whatever it is for hours. and your brain doesn't recharge during that time. It's not doing any kind of active recovery. It's not doing anything that's really helping you. So you can end up feeling more drained by the end of that, even though you haven't technically worked for 2 hours or for several hours. And it's not going to necessarily put you in a nice restful place for sleep either. And then sleep becomes a very important part, of course, of recharging and restarting the cycle.
Definitely. Yeah. In the 2 hours and 47 minutes and 15 seconds, I think I repeated it that days that I was gone, I did go skiing, because that was one of the key reasons to go up to Keystone was that I could ski. I did end up going skiing on one of the days, not all of them. And when I was on the chairlift alone, because of the pandemic and because there was literally nobody on the mountain, like there were like maybe 3 people on the whole chairlift from the beginning to the top. And, I didn't have headphones on purpose. I just kind of sat there waiting to get to the top. And besides hoping not to fall, all I could do was kind of look around me, count the trees, be grateful, admire nature. And that's one of the thoughts that I remember having is like, wow, like nature really does not care about being perfect. It's perfect in its imperfection. Every tree is different, and it's not going to sit there and compare itself to everybody else and see like, oh, you're a little taller than I am. I need to do something about it. But it was really, really refreshing.
That reminds me of all of our conversation with Steve Evers. That was a really good point of just being in nature. It is refreshing that way. And I think that's the other benefit of a change of scenery. I think nature is especially helpful because it is such a drastic change of scenery. It's not indoors. You may not be in an office, but you could be indoors at a hotel or somewhere else. But if you go into nature, that's something that very few of us get to work in. So it is a change of scenery, and you can appreciate just the variety of life, and everything changes just day to day. You can walk the same path on a walk over and over again, but it'll be different. There'll be different. A tree might have fallen over, some grass is different, some animal has run through or is there now, whatever it is. There's some variation, and it reminds you that it's not as stagnant and unchanging as it can feel when you're inside for weeks at a time in a pandemic.
Yeah. And a deer does not necessarily walk through your office and leave paw prints on your carpet. Maybe it does.
It'd be kind of cool.
Doesn't happen. We did have deer in our backyard. We saw paw prints of deer in our backyard. So until this summer, when my office becomes, gets moved into the backyard, I will not have those.
Although we do like to leave people with actionable advice. And I think that's the first piece we have for you. If you could invite a deer into your house, it's going to feel a lot more like a break. That's going to shake things up a lot.
Now, if you have cats and dogs, they can definitely change your scenery within the 4 walls.
So, step 1, if you can't get into nature, invite nature into your house.
Just start singing like Snow White. See what happens.
There's something like valuable just about stirring up your mindset, because it's easy to get stuck into habits. I mean, routines can be super helpful, but they can also be just sticking points. I mean, habits, there's a lot of research that has come out in the last decade or so about how to form habits, how useful it is. And a lot of people talking about, attaching a new habit you want to learn to something you're already doing. So you kind of in the moment, and just your brain can start to form all these shortcuts and all these very quick paths to continuing to do the same thing, which is super helpful if you're looking to wake up earlier or get into a routine with working out, or being consistent with things like that take a long time and require consistent input. But we can get into that rut, I think, with work and with jobs as well, because you start to get into, this is the time I have X meeting, this is the time I do that, and your brain's constantly working on the same few pieces of information and the same habits forming over time without any interruption. And if you don't find the purpose and meaning, and it's not feeling like it's changing something for you, then everything starts to feel a lot more like a rut. And they think that's what causes burnout more than extra hours. It's lack of meaning, lack of purpose. And the way to treat burnout is to find a little bit more meaningful work.
Very true. Yeah. It's the habits are good and bad, just like anything in extreme. Just following habits on autopilot can definitely be destructive.
And it leaves no room for, spontaneity. That leaves no room just to do something that you might not have done before. And I think everyone hopefully has had the experience of doing something they hadn't done before that they got a huge benefit from. And we're just lucky they had happened to have tried that time.
Yeah. Well, and it leaves no room for change, which is the only constant in life. So if you expect things to be happening the same way, which happens a lot, especially in the workplace with people, is like you're always expecting people to react the same way, whether the individual or the collective, or you expect someone, you know, that is in a job that loves that job. And I think we've talked about this before, to just keep loving doing the same thing over and over and over. It was like, oh, you know, like you really loved developing that code. How about you keep doing that for the next 10 years to 450?
Yeah.
Because why should you grow? It's convenient for me if you just keep doing the same thing and reacting the same way.
That's a really good point, is just how we interact with other people. Are we letting other people have their breaks and changes?
Yes.
And that goes back to some of that incentive structure too. You can be happy that somebody put in a lot of work over a month, but maybe the reward is go take some time off. Not so glad you did this. Here's the next task. I know you'll be able to do this one.
Yeah. And it does take a lot of effort from the leadership point of view to give permission and keep giving permission. So it can't be just yes, we respect you when you're on vacation, and then you're on the beach at 6 a.m. and get a text message that people didn't get their checks. You know, so besides the lack of actually respecting the vacation, it's even if you do respect the time off, you have to keep reminding and keep incentivizing. So it's not a one-off. That's a good habit to keep doing, actually, is telling your people to unplug when you see them online and they're on vacation or they reply to an email. And I remember doing that a lot with my team, is like, if you're off and you reply to an email, my answer is not going to be, well, it's going to be thank you. But with the thank you, it's going to go away, or I'm going to shut off your internet. I do not want to see you replying to emails.
That's a great point, and that's a great habit to get into, is just like that constant reminder. And it's a good point for what we're talking about anyway. We get into the habit, and if you can go out and tell every employee on their first day, you know, we love when people take time off, and we really encourage people to do so. But without that constant reinforcement, it's so easy to drift into all the habits that you can assume fairly safely people have. Because everybody has come from, at least sometime in their life, a workplace where it was not rewarded to take breaks, and usually, or they just have the guilt of feeling like they shouldn't take breaks, or there's stuff that comes up when they're on break, or they think that they've become, you know, a linchpin in some process, and now they have to be around every time it's run, whatever it is. There's some reason that they feel like they can't go. So if you don't reinforce that, I think we will tend to drift towards burnout, lack of breaks, not taking that time seriously. And it's a great way to lead by example too. If you're a leader on vacation, be like, look, I'm going to be out of reach for a few days. And, you know, maybe you still will be in reach if there is a specific emergency, but other leaders can then tap in and say, look, he's off. I'll be taking this portion of it. I've already been briefed on, you know, as much as I can. So just come to me if you have any questions. It then, you know, gives a little bit more transparency, share some work, which is always a good idea anyway, since people should have some knowledge of what other people are doing.
Yes. Would be nice.
Helps to know general processes, but it's a good time to lead by example. There's a chance to change things.
Yeah, and definitely, and that's for sure. The team I used to work with, but that we also work with now, when we get a chance to, they were also very good at sending me away when I was on break, because I was definitely not a good one to respect the break. Because of the pressure of like, oh, there's a fire. Is anybody else aware of this fire and can help the team? Or do I have to jump in and, you know, make sure that this is taken care of? And so they were always very good at, if they saw me online or interacting or any form of, I'm not really on break, they would tell me, go away. We've got this. Not for you.
That's also a good indication of trust that the team can challenge that, because we were just talking about like it being very important that the leaders continue to point that out. But that is, I think, a good indicator of when that message has started to take, when the team feels comfortable saying that the other direction, which is why it's important to lead by example first and not expect it just to get picked up and immediately put both directions. But once you start to get that bidirectional feedback of like, yes, please go take a break, you shouldn't be on this right now, then you've built that message feels a little bit more implicit, and people trust it enough that they're willing to remind you about it.
Yeah, and they'll know that I'll appreciate it and not cause any problems of any kind for challenging me.
Yeah, lack of retaliation ends up being a pretty important part in any kind of cultural change.
Yeah. should definitely be on the top list of leadership skills. Don't do that. Just don't.
It's also interesting you brought up like you go out for a couple of weeks, or you go out for a week, or even a couple of days, and you come back to a monstrous inbox. I mean, we've all seen this happen. We've all had that experience of like, oh my God. And what is the first thing everybody says in the first meeting when they're back? They're like, well, I'm catching up today. Yes. And I realized recently I took some time off and I, just like you, I got to go to the mountains for a bit. But when I came back, I realized that it wasn't like I took the time off. I shouldn't have to catch up to like go remake those days. It should be picked up from that place, right? And you might have to catch up on communications and some of the things that have changed and happened, or if there's a new priority. But yeah, that might be a little bit more incumbent on the team just to catch you up and be like, hey, I remember about where you were when you left. Some things have changed here, so this will probably be a new priority. But there is kind of this pressure to basically take this vacation, and it makes that vacation so much harder to come back from when you know that first day is inbox combing and meeting catch up and reading notes. Not that these are bad activities, but we take it as if we should try and get all of that done because we're already back and we should already be hitting the ground running. And that becomes a pretty quick case for burnout almost immediately after you had a vacation, at which point you start hoping for a new vacation, which people tend to be less receptive for on the team. And they're like, well, you were just gone for a week. You're like, well, okay. But I also then just jumped right back in and burned myself out immediately. So,
so I'm going to be gone again.
Yeah. I'm ready to go for another 3 hours, 47 minutes and 26 seconds.
Yeah. That's definitely in a good practice for that I've tried and succeeded. Or at least I felt like it was successful. I guess I should ask the other people to think and see what they think. In the past was to make it a point before I go on vacation to schedule even like a 20-minute, doesn't have to be an all day of meetings, but a specific meeting that's just about catching up on what I need to know. So now I've established, I have a team and I trust them to do the work without me. Big thing. And I also trust them that they know what matters to me from an information point of view. And even across team, it doesn't have to be in the same team. So that then when I come back and I do have the, 700 to 45,000 emails, depending on which job and which moment, I can ignore probably most of them and just mark all as read because I have scheduled a meeting where people are going to tell me, this is what you need to know. It's these 5 things. These are the decisions. This is where we're left off. And this is where we need your help.
I think it's a great practice. I guess we should poll the crowd and see what see how everybody else feels about that one. But that one is that feels like a good way to go transition back in without becoming an overload immediately. I think there's that pressure to like return, and there's almost that pressure to feel refreshed. You know what I mean? Like you're being asked to be like, well, you just had some time off. I'm sure you're just ready to go, and you're like, well, yes, but also no.
Yeah. Starting the car from not moving, not ready to go, not ready to drive the Formula One race yet.
This isn't a Tesla. It's not just gonna pop up to speed immediately. Let's take it. It doesn't have to be long, but a brief ramp up, and it makes it easier to do that ramp up when you do like that 20-minute meeting instead of trying to read 2,000 emails over the next 4 hours.
And it's really important to establish what that meeting should bring to the table, and having that trust too, of people knowing you enough that they understand what it is important for you to hear and what's not. At least from an urgency point of view, you'll eventually catch up on everything else, but maybe you don't need to know, today that they've switched chips brands from Lay's to Doritos. Wait until you go to the kitchen and realize there are no chips at all, and then you wonder what happened. But so there's definitely a lot of communication that needs to happen, a lot of trust, a lot of just working as a team, understanding each other, being able to read minds, which really comes from just, understanding what's important to each individual. And also the fact that the answer can't be, oh, not much. Because then all I'm going to do is go back and read the 45,000 emails. Because clearly, if I have 40,000 emails in my inbox, something did happen.
I think it's a crucial point that it comes down to some amount of trust and empathy. Like there's empathy in knowing what the other person's job is and what they will be interested in. There's empathy in knowing what a break is and what it means. Like it is important to take a break. It's important to defend other people's breaks as much as your own. And then it is important to understand the mindset going into and coming out of the break as well. Because then you can better help support the transition points.
Yeah, definitely.
One of the things I think that takes practice in it is giving yourself permission to take the break. And sometimes it's good to define what you're going to do on that break to some extent. It doesn't have to be, hour by hour, but even if you just have an evening off and that it's a Tuesday evening, Wednesday's work is going to be there. You know what you're going to have to do. But if you give yourself that permission and you specifically say, Tuesday, I'm taking off. I just haven't sat for a while. I'm going to watch some TV. You can do that without the guilt of feeling like, have I watched too much? Have I watched too little? So there is some amount of giving yourself permission and very explicit permission that helps when you're going to go give yourself a break and you're going to take that time, because that allows it to become much more of an actual rest rather than something you feel like you're either getting away with or you shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, very, very true. And it's hard. It's hard to give ourselves permissions to take a break because of the never-ending laundry list of things that we should be doing. And as entrepreneurs, I think it's even harder. Yeah. Because, we don't get paid time off. I mean, no, we don't really get time off. Time off is from life, is time off from the business. And if you're building the business, not working on it really could feel guilty. It could feel like you're falling behind. It could feel like maybe you're leaving your business partner to take all the pressure. And so that there's a big piece there to distinguish between I'm thinking about the business because I have all these ideas and all these things that I want to bring in, and I'm working on the business. So which one of the two? Because especially if you really love what you're doing, you're not going to shut it off. And I think having the pressure to shut it off is going to cause more stress than actually just letting those thoughts and ideas come.
That's a really good point. The idea of especially of work you love. Like if you really like what you're doing and you like what you're getting to do, and I think entrepreneurship is very much like that, because hopefully you're working on something that gives you some excitement, something you want to see happen. And if you have that, then it's hard to let that just sit by the wayside. You want to keep working on that, but you can easily burn yourself out and need a break just as much there. And that was an interesting one. I was just listening to a different podcast about annual planning and how most CEOs and entrepreneurs will go take, or at least the ones that end up growing the business year by year, they go take a good weekend or week early in a year to think and plan what they want this to be. And they'll go usually, find a cabin in the woods or a beach or something, somewhere that they can be change of scenery, something different. And you just spend time thinking about a little bit more the larger direction of the business instead of the to-do list that you've created over the year, where you're like, yeah, these are the 85 discrete things I know I have to get done, but I'm going to set these aside so that I can think a little bit larger picture, reprioritize, and then come back with a much fresher mind. Yeah, that's a great advice. And also establish that safety within the team, that it's like, if I know you're in Breckenridge or you're on break on the beach, well, then stop emailing me. I'm not going to schedule any meetings where you have to be part of. Mm-hmm. And, and if you text or email with some idea or article or, more strategic thing that just came to mind, that's also acceptable. Yeah. There has to be a balance, and it's a gray area. Yeah. And I think it's just up to the trust of the team to be able to set the boundaries. Like if somebody is messaging you, like, I can't, I'm not going to respond to that right now. Yeah. It's fair to say that as long as you have that built trust. Yeah. So a lot of this comes back down to trust, really. It always does. Trust and values. We don't need anything else. Because we do put an unnatural emphasis on the value of, I would say hard work, but it's almost more the value of appearing to work hard. Like we put a lot of
Yes.
emphasis on making sure that happens. And that can be both a self-induced guilt trip as well as a company-wide cultural guilt trip that is overly common, but not particularly helpful. And I think once people take a good deliberate break, you can start to see breaks not as this time where I'm going to have to go catch up afterwards, or this time that I'm kind of stealing away from the team or stealing away from the overall task that I'm working on. And you start to see it more as a tool where you're like, okay, I can feel the slowing of the thought process. I can feel how everything starts to hurt a little bit. I can feel how I'm tired. I could go try and write up this next landing page, or I could sleep, or I can take a nap, or I'm going to go take a walk. And once you start to see that as a choice, it's much easier to let your brain simmer, which is useful when you're trying to solve complex problems, and B, just a good idea in general. But it's also something that allows you to, once you see that as the break that it is and the additional power that it gives you, you start to use that as a tool and something in your belt, just like, writing up different templates or having knowledge from before. It starts to become a tool you can use over and over again of like, yeah, I know this situation. This situation means I'm going to do better if I take a break. If I sleep on this, if I just step away for a while, I'm going to do this task better.
For sure. We one of the things that we work on in coaching sessions is influencers. And I'm sure we'll do a podcast on that. But there's basically 6 types of influencers: spiritual, emotional, social, environmental, physical, and mental. And in the physical influencer, which is the most tangible one, lack of sleep is one of the things that comes up. Is, how do you perform? How do you show up? How does lack of sleep, for example, or poor diet, or too much wine, or not enough wine, depending on which spectrum you're on, affect how you show up? And it's usually pretty clear for everybody eventually what happens when there's lack of sleep. There may be a period or some sort of confusion on like, why am I yelling at everything? Why am I upset at anything from the milk of carton being backwards in the fridge to, the end of the world, at the same rate of anger. And then if you pause long enough and you realize like, oh, wait, I didn't sleep last night because I was woken up 3 times and I was too cold or too hot or whatever happened. So that makes me overtired. And when I'm overtired, I don't focus. I'm in, threat behavior. Everything seems harder. And so burning out is the same thing. So if you equate burning out to lack of sleep, well, are you going to be your best employee? Are you going to be your best self at work if you're overworked and overstressed all the time?
Unlikely.
I would love to see that happen. I turn into Hulk. So You want me to take a break?
I definitely feel like for me, very similar. Like emotional regulation is like the first thing to go. Like, it's much harder to not be irritable, to not just have those little things where you're like, oh my God, I cannot take that again. Like the milk carton. You're like, oh my God, are we out of milk again? We left oh my God. Like it's and then that feels like, that could ruin the next 2 hours of just kind of stewing on that sometimes, where you just, or it feels that way, or it's just something that just ends up coloring your mood a little bit going forward, and it's harder and harder to pull yourself out of it. That's definitely something that I feel when I get enough nights of no sleep, or you woke up 4 times and you're sleeping weird on your neck, and now everything hurts a little bit. All the usuals.
Yeah, definitely all the usuals, and especially when it's a team and everybody seems to be snapping, or everybody seems to be reacting a little bit with short-tempered way too often, then step back and realize, okay, like what's been going on? Oh, we've all been working crazy hours in the middle of a holiday, and there's a lot of work to do. And looking ahead to that, it's even more important as a leader, is looking ahead and knowing there's a lot of work to do. There's Christmas coming up. How are we going to balance this? And one of the things that I always ask first myself, and then I make sure the team is very aware and comfortable understanding, is luckily we're in professions where we're not saving lives. And so it's to actually think that and remember, it's like when you feel the pressure of having to work, even though it's Christmas Eve, or having to stay up late a couple more hours because this is not quite as done as you wanted it to be, just that, remember, we're not saving lives. If we need an extra day, we'll have the conversation with the client and get an extra day.
Yeah. That's another important thing, is just we get that feeling of like it's going to be the end of the world if we try and push that day.
Yeah.
And that, especially when we're already tense, or as the team's tense, and the holidays is a great example, because that's definitely a time where it's more stressful. There's more stuff to do. You're kind of excited for some of it, but it's also just a lot of work, and you're going to have some work, some time off, and try and balance those. And so it's always a bit of a guessing game. And that leaves, I think, people, it's kind of like the pandemic has been. You are in that state of ambiguity for long enough, and then it becomes difficult just to kind of continue in that state and just manage it as if that's going to be your constant go-to.
Yeah. And having that kind of foresight to look ahead and realize like this is where we're headed, given where we are in the project and on the timeline and what's going on in people's lives, and we're in the pandemic, and whatever other 50,000 things are happening, and kids are home from school, or their school just shut down, whatever you want to add to that, is having that foresight to say like, hey, like the next week it's looking pretty heavy for everybody. So from a project perspective, let's prioritize. Let's take some things off the plate. Let's, not go out of our way to produce Steven Spielberg type videos, and maybe take a few notch down on some of these videos. And, it's okay if they are, runner up to the Academy Awards. We're still going to be doing a good job. It's still over expectations from what the client needs. And we can still get there without burning out and without sacrificing everybody in the process.
I think that helps twofold, not only in that next week where it would have been much busier, but it also, to your point earlier, is setting the example of saying, it's okay to say these things. It's okay to find these paths and make these changes, take the breaks.
Yeah.
And we kind of know this implicitly, and it's kind of a destructive portion of thinking of mind and body differently. We know when we're like working out, like you don't just do, I don't know, push-ups endlessly. You have to break at some point.
Maybe some other people do.
Like we kind of were like, yeah, I'll work out and then I'll stop. And then especially, professional athletes will definitely tell you about the importance of taking physical breaks. But I think anybody who does the gym enough, hopefully, isn't burning themselves out, because you're risking injury, not energy. You're risking injury
and energy.
You're risking energy. You're going to get so much energy after this. But if you just go to the point of burnout all the time, they literally call it burnout too. It's not helpful. You reach the point of failure. You're not actually like building anything. You can't just ask yourself to continue a physical activity forever and then get better at it. You can't run a marathon by just continually running and running and running and running and just having that work.
We should ask Emer. She trains for marathons.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure she doesn't just run until the day of the marathon, and then she's just running.
Well, it's a habit now.
Why would I stop?
And we understand that with like physical workout, we kind of understand like there is a break, and there's still a lot of like shame and guilt over if we feel like we are working out enough, or we didn't do as well as a previous day or something. There can be that feeling of regret, which is equally unhelpful. And that's one of the things we talked about with Shante. Shante hit that one on the head. She's like, when you need the break, take the break and listen to your body for what it actually needs, because you're going to get the results faster, and you're not going to hate yourself to get there.
Yeah.
And we do that with physical activity. We just don't treat the same, mental activity, it's all the same body.
It's interesting how, we're very clear, for the most part, we're very clear on physical stuff, influencers, activities, where our limit is. Again, for the most part, we all, hike a 14er without ever actually doing any training, or no more than walking around the block, and you may end up in bed being sore for 3 days. I don't know, I've heard about that. And you do that, and we all kind of push the limit sometimes physically, but mentally and emotionally and spiritually we forget. There's almost like, because it's unseen, and unfelt, and you're not limping around and not being able to walk up and down the stairs, or, have a sprayed ankle. There's that, like, well, no, like I have to be superhuman. I have to be superhuman mentally in focus and concentration and productivity. I have to be superhuman in grieving is a big one, that's like, no, push it aside. No, I'm done. How long could you possibly grieve this one situation? It's done. We always put a timeline on ourselves and others, unfortunately, on grieving, and just all these things. And I'm like, well, no, how about you do what you need to do? It doesn't matter how long it takes.
It really is an interesting point of how much we discount what we can't see. Yeah. If it's not visible to us, we let that go entirely, which is why communication is so important, because there's no way to see that. Somebody walks into the office and they're just feeling exhausted because they've had a long week, or they're just mentally tired, or they're grieving, or they're whatever mental state they have brought in. It's not going to be visible, and if it is, it's not going to be visible to the degree that person is feeling it, because we aren't going to be able to relate unless we're incredibly attuned to that person. We know something's a little bit wrong, but even then we're not going to be able to describe it, which is why communication then becomes our stopgap, our fallback for, hey, you can't see what's going on with me right now, but this is what's going on.
And empathy, because we can see. I'm a big believer that we can all see when something is off. We can feel it from how people respond to texts or don't respond. We can see it, especially if we see facial expressions. We can definitely see it. We can hear in the tone of voice. And we don't know what to do, because if people don't open up by themselves, then we're like, well, I'm going to let that be. And maybe it's me, not them. And so I'm going to ignore it. And they'll tell me if something is wrong. Well, if somebody is grieving or burnt out, or, just struggling for any reason, they may not want to share openly and just, put a big sign up. They may not all be me. Not that I share all the time, but I try to, but they may not be that comfortable. They may feel a lot of shame and holding back. And so be attuned to that by how they are showing up, it's huge. Also, another big psychological safety piece in a team is having the team being able to just say, hey, Cristina, you're in a bad mood today. What's going on? Don't really care about what we're talking about work-wise. Let's pause. What's going on? Because clearly you're not in your best position to be talking to other humans right now.
Actually brought up a really good point, and that's something I would correct myself on from 5 minutes ago. It's the communication is key, but there's a lot of things you might not want to share, or you just don't want to. And the trust then comes in believing that somebody says, you know what, I just can't show up fully today, and I don't want to talk about it. It's not happening for me today. That trust is incredibly important, because then you can say, if the team is willing to accept that, respond with okay, I totally get it. Let us know if there's anything we can do, then that's going to be a much more supportive environment. And it doesn't have to come down to communicating every last detail of why you feel a way, because then you'll also end up feeling like you have to justify everything that you're feeling. And that gets really messy and Indeed. Probably uncomfortable if something you didn't want to share in the first place.
Yeah. One of the things that I think I learned from our friend Gail is to, instead of asking a direct question, that it's a yes or no, is there anything that I can do? Because then, well, if you're not feeling like sharing, guess what the answer is going to be? No. Because then if you say yes, you're going to have to share, and then opens up a whole can of worms. But actually asking, what can I do to help? Because then the answer can be just be here, or just give me time. Because it's not a yes or no answer.
I like that. That's good advice. And that's a good way of just a good way in general of communicating. You don't have to know everybody's mindset, know everything that's happening to them. If the trust is there, if you can trust the other person, and just you're going to be attuned, like you were saying, to what they're feeling. You will have some knowledge that there's something off, but B, you can trust that person might just need some space, and you can give them that, and it will be better in the long run for it.
Definitely, yeah. And for breaks too. I mean, it's definitely helpful to switch the questions from, are you going to take a break, to when are you taking a break? Because now you actually have permission. You've given permission. You have permission. And then you get to think about it.
And you're putting it in a supportive way when you say, when are you going to take a break? You're saying, I am expecting you to take a break, and I support this decision.
Yeah. Yes. Are you going to take a break could possibly be interpreted as you better say no.
Yeah.
Or somebody else is going to be sitting in your chair when you come back. Or you're going to be cut out of all decisions.
Either of the fun things that we all kind of worry about happening, or worry about being replaced.
Yeah, exactly. Exclusion, being replaced.
I think it's very much true. And to your point of being able to feel when other things are off, if you want to be able to increase your own empathy, I think one good task to work on is knowing and being able to describe your own emotional state. The more you can be in touch with that, the more you can be accepting of that and understanding where you're at and able to explain that, the more open you're going to be to other people feeling the same way or feeling similar ways or having a brand new feeling that you've learned to kind of train that on yourself. And that will not only help you because you'll feel better and be able to explain whatever you're going through, but it will also make you a little bit more empathetic to other people. I think that's an important thing to take on if you want to increase this skill set.
Definitely is. And I have a new thought leader crush. I get crushes when I find out people exist. And then I binge listen to anything that they put out there and read them and follow them everywhere. Well, not physically. But social media everywhere. So my latest thought leader crush is Dr. Susan David, who's a psychologist, and she just wrote a book called Emotional Agility, which is one of the many things I'm listening to. And I love the fact that she points out how the data, and just in general, even without massive numbers of data, people usually describe their emotions as 3 words. I mean, there's like Bible size lists of emotions and adjectives that we could use to describe emotions. And typically 99% of the time, 99% of people say, I'm sad, I'm happy, or I'm upset or angry, upset/angry. And so one of the things that she really highlights is this: describe your emotions with more words than just those 3. Like, what's sad? Is it, I feel excluded, I am grieving, I feel alone, what's sad it means something clearly, but it doesn't describe what's actually going on. You're upset or you're angry, or I'm sad because I stubbed my toe in the shower and it hurts, and I should have been looking where I was going before looking away. And so that what's actually going on, like, use one of the thousands and thousands of other words, or 3 or 4 of them, to describe what's actually going on at the moment.
Be like trying to describe Vincent van Gogh's Starry, Starry Night as a pretty blue painting. Like, doesn't really do it justice. There's a lot more going on there. we use the word blue, but there's such an encompassing variety of things that covers, just like the word sad, just as an umbrella term for thousands of different little things that could happen. And that the amazing part about this, which is also a big other coaching skill, is when you pause to actually have to verbally say how you're feeling, you've now disconnected from the reaction, because you've taken the break from I'm angry and I'm going to punch something, or I'm angry and I'm going to yell. Now, if I'm angry and I'm like, oh, wait, I'm angry. Why am I angry? Oh, I'm frustrated. I feel excluded. I thought, we had agreed on something and it seems like I was misunderstood, or I misunderstood. By the time I'm done going through all that process, I haven't yelled at the person in front of me. Which kind of goes back to our central thesis. Kind of important to take a break. Yes. Take that moment, take that step back, get the perspective.
Yeah. So it's not just about going to the mountains. It's about taking a break between, what is it called? Stimulation and reaction.
Yes.
Yeah. And all you need is a few seconds, because by the time you take those few seconds, since we cannot multitask, very big myth, our brain cannot multitask. Our brain now focuses on figuring out what caused the emotion, what the emotion actually is. So the brain cannot get us to yell and figure that out at the same time. You could try, but I don't know that it's going to work out very well.
I think a quick, cool shortcut to get to that, to take that step, is to change your internal language and possibly external if you're yelling already. From I am angry to I
Yes.
feel angry.
Yes.
Because
Another big Susan David thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
You having a feeling. You are not the feeling.
Yes.
It's not your identity. It is an experience that is currently happening.
Yeah. And that would even, to decrease the shame piece and piggyback on that, when you see that reaction on somebody else and you're making the very big interpretation that you actually know how they feel, like, why are you upset? First of all, I am not upset. I'm a woman. I'm a human being. So let's separate how I feel if it's upset to who I am, because I'm not permanently upset. Well, hopefully I'm not permanently upset. It's not in my DNA. You can't, look at it in my blood tests. And also, I don't feel upset. I am depressed. I am tired because I didn't sleep last night. I am really sick of the snow outside.
It's such an important, like, that's the empathy to extend to other people. Like, just to say, like, I don't even need to know the reason. I just know you're feeling down today. And if you want to explain it, that's fine. We can talk about it. If you don't want to talk about it, that's fine. Yeah. Know that I see something is off. What can I do to help? And if nothing, please feel free to, take some time, take whatever. Like, we can allow for that, especially since it will make everything better in the long run. Yes. We always consider this as like, well, I guess we'll take, so if somebody's going to take like 20 minutes off work to have some personal conversation, like, yes, because then you get, the next 3 hours that are way more productive than just an hour of sitting and thinking about the thing you haven't discussed that could have taken 20 minutes.
I know. Rather than staring at the wall or yelling at everybody and stomping off, maybe you can actually be productive.
Not that yelling and stomping isn't fun, just not very helpful.
I wouldn't do it too often if you actually want a team that actually wants to work with you beyond when they have to work with you.
Like I said, not helpful.
Yeah.
Well, this is much more of one of our classic episodes where we get towards the end and then find about 98 revelations. Thank you guys.
It's like, so wait, another one.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Please go take a break. I would absolutely recommend just getting some deliberate break time in. And I use that word deliberate very deliberately because that helps me personally, like when I need to make that transition. And I've definitely felt a huge lift, even just in only a couple of days away. I'm looking to take a little bit more time, a little more frequently, just to unpack the mind. And I hope everybody gets a chance to do the same, especially as we hopefully roll out the end of this pandemic and look at the next few changes life's going to throw our way.
Get ready for the next pandemic.
Yeah.
But 20, no, 21. What are you? We should change the words. There's something will happen. That's life.
Well, thank you guys so much. Life's coming at you. Feel free to take a break. Take some break because it is life too.
It's not selfish.
No.
It's selfish not to take a break because nobody wants to be around pissed off, upset, depressed, short-tempered people.
That goes for employees, employers, parents, children, people you work with, people you
significant others,
everything.
Cats, dogs, deer.
Yes.
All of them.
Especially when you invite them in your living room.
Especially deer, yes. You do not want to be around a pissed off deer. You definitely don't want to be pissed off when a deer is around.
Just turn the lights off and let them nap on your couch. They need the break.
Yes. So just turn the other way and take a break. Well, thanks again. Take a break, even from listening to our podcast. We're not going anywhere. That's why they're recorded.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.